want people to feel rooted in something that is holding them, inspiring them, making them feel sort of like wonder, tears welling up, and also that deep sense of empathy and connection that one can get from bringing a non-living thing to life through the craft of puppetry.
This is Real Perspective, and I'm your host, Eli Yetter-Bowman. On this show, I interview various professional storytellers, often in the documentary space like myself, and we explore the craft of storytelling. Guests share their honest perspectives, from past mistakes to tips for succeeding and other genuine insights on how we can make a living creatively. This show includes no advertisers to keep things more authentic. If you want to support us, help us out, we do offer a variety of consulting services for filmmakers, storytellers, businesses, and other groups, on top of producing documentaries. Shoot us a message at etherealfilms.org if you want to learn more. And now, it's time for the show. Today's guests are Donvon and Jan, the co-founders of the 25-year-old Paperhand Puppet Intervention. Paperhand has become an icon in Chapel Hill for its unique blending of live music, performance puppetry, and activism. I met them first as a fan of their work, and later to collaborate on a special 4-part performance created for our upcoming documentary, Gen X. In this episode, we talk about their unique approach to storytelling and how they inspire hope in others through their art.
My name's Donvon Zimmerman, and I am one of the co-founders and directors of Paperhand Puppet Project, Puppet Intervention. Been at this for about 25 years, and that's the long and short of it.
And I'm Jan Berger. I'm also a co-founder and co-director of Paperhand, and started it with Donvon together, and happy to be here.
Welcome to the podcast. Yeah. Wonderful. So Donvon, could you tell me a little bit of your background as an artist, perhaps before Paperhand?
Yeah, so I started out as a kid just being interested in drawing and doing creative stuff, and so my mom helped me get up the gumption to audition for a school for creative and performing arts when I was in the 4th grade. I got accepted into the school after doing an audition where you have to do some dancing, do some singing, submit a portfolio, etc. And from then I went all the way through to 12th grade and graduated from there, and was just sort of highly exposed to creative energy, if you could say. There was a lot of always plays and performances and art projects, and so I got to have 4 periods of art a day, like some art and some drama, and then an elective like choir or whatever I wanted to do. But also, you know, of course, you do the academics as well. And then I went on to art school for a little while at the Art Academy of Cincinnati, and after foundations year, I just decided to start traveling and become whatever artist I thought I was going to be able to become, just through my own determination and my own practice, creating a practice around making. And right around that time, I came upon Bread and Puppet in Vermont, right at 19 years old, fresh out of art school. And that opening year, I had decided already not to go back. And when I found that, it was a real epiphany of being like the perfect synthesis home for all of the things that I was interested in exploring, from theater and storytelling to art and music and dance and all the things. It resonated with my spirit to be a jack of all trades kind of a person, maybe master of none, but hey, that's okay.
Were your parents artists?
No, not really. I mean, I never met my dad. He was a wandering hippie in the late 60s, and my mom ended up being a social worker for her whole career. So there wasn't really known artistry in the family. There was some, like, I had a musician aunt who, you know, did some recordings and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't have a real family history understanding of anyone being like a an artist for a living by any means. But I just had that spark in me, and my mom was supportive enough to say, go for it. And I do credit her for giving me that sort of encouragement. And she didn't give me the whole like, well, you might want to have a plan B or a backup plan or whatever. She just said, if you're happy, you can do it. She didn't want to hold me back, which was really sweet of her.
I resonate with that. My mom is very similar, very encouraging.
I definitely try to be that for my own daughter without also pushing her to be an artist, since I'm an artist for a living. Like, there's that tendency to be like, all right, well, this could all be yours.
Yeah. What is Bread and Puppet for people who don't know?
Oh, Bread and Puppet is a 55-year running, I think, giant puppet company that does masks, shadows, giant puppet pageantry, and shows, touring shows. They're up in Glover, Vermont. It was started by Peter Schumann, who's German, and he came over and started protesting, doing activism work in New York City in the 60s, and ended up just getting this farm up in Vermont where they had as a home base. And so that, they used to do these summer weekends of pageantry and puppet plays, and I got exposed to that at 19, like I was saying. In a nutshell, they do revolutionary, beautiful art.
Are they like the top tier in the world of like puppet performance?
I definitely would say that they're one of the most well-known. I think if you gauge their success by how much of a reach they have, they definitely have a world renownedness going on, which is a pretty great thing. I mean, they're a nonprofit, so they just survive through donations, and I don't really know what their full success rate in numbers goes, but they definitely have had a profound effect on a lot of people, and also fostered the inspiration that came up for a lot of people like Jan and myself. We call ourselves the illegitimate grandchildren of Peter Schumann, and the seeds that he sowed of inspiration really took root in a lot of places, not just us. There's a lot of other companies that have come to be.
I like being able to cherish more like those types of impact, the dividends that society or maybe the world has gained from a group like this, a performing team like this, or like starting with one person and becoming more, versus I heard it just a minute ago, how the evils of capitalism make us immediately think, well, how can we look at financial success as the determinant? I just wanted to take a minute to recognize I feel that balance too a lot as a professional creative, because to an extent you do have to have money to live, and that's unfortunate because you don't want it to negatively influence the work, but it is like it's an essential component of it.
I think it's about needs being met. I think all of Peter's needs are met. And then not only that, but he's able to support a pretty large team to pay other artists and other administrators and whatnot to sort of like keep something going and keep the messages coming out. And he's definitely anti-capitalist, like all the way. And so I think he keeps his own, what he makes. He doesn't care. He just, as long as his basic needs are met, which I think is cool.
I don't want to derail. I could do a whole separate podcast on like economics and social structure.
Oh,
which is
sure.
how the unfortunate part of when people are really successful, but they're like well motivated, they're like good people, they tend to give away that wealth, and like in order to disrupt the big wealth systems, we actually might need people who can sequester some of that wealth to then use it to... Anyways, Jan, would love to fire back to the original question. You give us a little bit of a history of your life artistically.
Sure. I did have a couple of artists for parents, and my parents are both artists and activists too, which is two things that I kind of inherited. I like to say I was protesting the Vietnam War while still inside my mom's belly. Got arrested in utero. But my mom did work in the 70s for like radical publications, making illustrations and layout, and my dad was a mural painter in Boston. And they also took me to see Bread and Puppet Theater. When I was a kid, like probably 6 or something, we would start going up each summer and camp out in the farm fields around and then go in to see the shows. So it kind of infused in me. And when I was a young person trying to figure out what I was going to do, I was doing activist stuff like Food Not Bombs and Homes Not Jails in Boston, and learning some puppetry from the Boston Puppeteers Cooperative, Sarah Peedy, also had worked for Bread and Puppet years ago and then started her own thing in Boston. And so getting to play around with paper mache and clay, she was a great person to help me start off doing those things. From there, I think that, just gaining more and more influences over the years. So working a little bit with folks at theater in Minneapolis while I was traveling across country, and then working with David Solnit and Art and Revolution out when I moved to the Bay Area. And then that economics thing coming in again, not being able to afford living in the Bay Area well, and coming back to North Carolina, and it's all wound up together, taking the different influences and experiences that we had and finding ourselves, because we were both volunteering for the Haw River Learning Celebration over the years, where we teach fourth graders about the river and do songs and stuff like that. And then we were like, hey, I like doing puppets, want to do that? But yeah, for me, my experience being a kid, growing up in a family of artists, liking to draw, and also liking being out there doing activist stuff, helping out wherever I could, printing banners. Eventually I did go and work with Bread and Puppet for a couple of summers, and just all of those cumulative experiences kind of building together to help me, and then my collaboration with Donvon just to start our own company. And just do this thing.
I just gave you my sort of school education, but after 19, after I had gotten that real hit of a epiphany spark from the Bread and Puppet experience, I started making masks immediately, but was involved with a group of friends and people, networks that were protesting, and the Nevada test site, and also did some work for Food Not Bombs and some of the other locations. We were doing a lot of feeding of people at protests by doing a lot of dumpster diving. Back in the day, it was a big thing. So I had my own sort of like activism going on, because I didn't want to just make art for art's sake, So I think Jan was probably more involved in a lot of that stuff, but it was definitely something that was constantly in and around. I was doing farming, organic farming up in New England, timber frame building, getting some skills together. Also, the mask making / giant puppet building and performing thing was the thing that I was trying to navigate a way to like make it work as the main pathway that I was walking on, and then let other things. So I was able to get there and stop doing carpentry maybe at least 15 years ago, where I was able to just only do puppetry. But it does take some dogged determination to just keep putting your stuff out there. Yeah. And also to like take it to places like protests and things where you're not getting paid. You're just doing it because you care, and I feel like it lends a real beautiful side to the messages sometimes, where it draws people in, which is a big piece, I think, of both of Jan and I's motivation to like make some art that just sort of like captures people's imagination or hearts in some ways, or sparks some kind of interest, so that they can get closer to what you're trying to say. There's sometimes like a lot of anger at protests, and legitimately so. We just wanted to have another element.
Yeah, Donvon and I both had experience doing carpentry, and I think that it's just one of those things where whatever your life experiences are, and whatever kind of things that you collect along your journey become things that you can then put into puppetry, because it is one of those art forms where there's so many different things that are coming together, from sewing and sculpting and performing and building and drawing and printing and mime and community organizing, all the things that go together to create a performance. And so having whatever those foundational things are have helped us in the long run. We were both able to quit our carpentry jobs, and that's a huge sort of foundational moment, I think. And I think I was thinking about it too, like we also both dropped out of school.
Yeah, after 1 year.
Wow. Yeah. And I think
school,
that there's another thing about that too, of just kind of like, yeah, there's great stuff that we're learning from school, but it's also like we both had just so much interest in other things and wanted to try things ourselves and be like, okay, we're ready to try things. And it's part of what we brought to Paperhand is just like, we just want to keep trying things. We're excited about making stuff and performing and seeing what happens.
I'd like to say something too, as just a fan of Paperhand. One thing that, and as a fellow artist, is really unique about it is because it is inherently a really eclectic type of experience in so many ways. I mean, the variety, the multimedia nature of it. And what I'm hearing too is that each of you have brought in a lot of different experiences from the past, a lot of different skills, jack of all trades, to make something, to synthesize something that is like wholly unique. And I feel like that's an important part of it. I mean, there are so many different art forms. So many of them are like single layer. Paperhand is like, I don't even know how many layers.
It's a lot of layers.
Yeah. Which I imagine is also challenging.
Oh yeah, definitely. But we both, I think I could say this for Jan, we both get fed by the community sort of like energy surge that kind of supports the art when it starts to come together, when we're doing our job right and sort of gently guiding where we're wanting it to go and sharing our vision well with the people that come into our sphere. There is a sort of real magic that happens where the synthesis of all of those different people's energies and efforts, when it really does come together, that definitely gives it fuels my spiritual battery, so I don't get drained by it. I mean, granted, there's times when I'm real tired, like in the midst of doing a giant production. And a lot of that actually comes from just like the extra stuff that it's not the work itself, but it's like people's personal tragedies and traumas that they're all bringing. You have 30 people coming into and they're showing up with all of their
everything,
humanity and all the parts that are hurting and everything. And so you're trying to, I mean, not that is not something I don't want to deal with, but it's just, it does make it sort of like challenging in that, and sometimes so you have more dramaful years than others, and then sometimes it's just like, oh, that was a pretty like, whoosh, like no one had any major calamities go on in their own personal lives. But if I wasn't being fed by it, I think I would have already lost most of my energy to do it, because if it didn't fill me up in some way, because it is a lot of energy out to pull everyone in and do all the dance of creating a giant show.
I think that performing too is a type of art that feeds you, that you get lots of feedback, whereas like a visual artist, you might sell things in a gallery, you may never even meet the people that buy your art or that see it and get excited by it, except for occasionally for like an opening or whatever. And it's very isolated. You're often, working by yourself in your studio. The kind of art that we do, we bring in as many people as possible. We make it a collaborative effort as much as possible, and we get to see the audience feedback. But then also there's many ways in which Paperhand we try to like expand out into the world, so that it's kind of like the puppets are alive. We do workshops. We teach people how to make puppets so they can carry it on. We go to schools and we do shows there, and we do a lot of protests and actions, and we help support different people's endeavors. So it's like the puppets themselves are having a life, sometimes even without us, where it's just they're coming into the real world and making people's visions and their ideas and their dreams bigger. And it's a neat thing to be able to like take it to the stage, take it off of the stage, and like bring it in lots of different ways into the world.
I want to build off of this point, the specific idea of how it can be feeding for the soul, how it can be so nourishing. Not a lot of artists get the experience to actually like witness and interact or even see change happening with an audience member. Performing arts, of course, like have that by definition, but even that can be removed in some circumstances, right? If you're a big performing troupe, you may not even go out and talk to the audience, versus like this more radical example of if Paperhand is actually just showing up at a protest and actively engaged with the cultural movements or shift that's trying to happen. I do really connect with this because the work that I try to do involving documentary, I think what's interesting is I didn't know that I would love this part of it so much when we started. We started like 7 years ago with not a ton of experience doing that thing. I had some experience in a lot of different arts, but I had not directed a lot of documentaries. But I thought that stories could really motivate people to get an idea that they wouldn't get from just hearing it, and that maybe people's hearts and minds could change. And then I got to see that a few years in when we started to do events with people in space and actually witness like those cogs turn, and just to dive back to what I think is so unique about Paperhand, especially being involved in activism, is how you can just bring someone in with something that is interesting looking, that is unusual, that is bizarre, that is beautiful, that is like gripping in its own right, and almost like you hook people with that, and now suddenly they are like receptive to, oh shit, there's like a real thing happening right now that matters, that is impacting people in my community. And I was just going to ignore it because I don't want to deal with protesters. But because of this giant bird or whatever.
This giant bird.
Yeah.
That giant bird.
As an example,
Yeah.
or a big sun god, now I'm paying attention. I mean, that was certainly the motivation with like Sammy and I last year of, wait a minute, we have this really complicated story that is difficult and it's scary, and approaching you guys to say, like, could we do some sort of collaboration? Because I think you really succeed in that way. Like, I think that is one of the most compelling areas of Paperhand's form of art. That was a really long tangent of just me being a fan.
I get what you're saying. I think the stories are important. There's no way around that. They form so much of who we are in the world and how we relate to each other. And obviously competing narratives are a big theme in how the world is unfolding. Who's saying what, and having a more convincing, I guess, machine that puts their ideas together into a structured narrative that people resonate with. It's bizarre to watch, and it's sometimes beautiful and it's sometimes horrifying in a way, because that's just sort of the human condition, if we're going to be honest. And I think Jan and I try to lean into starting with the awe and the wonder of just living on a planet that is so rich in so many ways, such a like rare jewel in the universe, and that we get to have this. It's such a privilege, and there's a reason for a lot of reverence to come from that, and therefore and by doing so, maybe having a chance at survival is one motivating factor. We start there. There is some separation. I do consider our work on the stage to be activism for sure, but it's like, it's not the same vibe as being on the streets or like doing some kind of more direct action.
Yeah.
It is a crafted, honed place where story and art and music and all the things kind of coalesce. And more I do feel like see myself leaning into the idea that the story just wants to be essentially that all of these elements of the world are alive in a real way, not just an imaginary way. Yeah. We're making it imaginary but we're making them alive, like rivers and trees and giant beasts that represent just the wild or the earth itself, natural phenomenon, and then letting people have a space and an opportunity to just connect with that as a reality. It I feel like nurtures the right kind of underpinning for real, I think, conversations to happen, or better, a better unfoldment to be possible, if you know what I mean. Like, so I'm trying to support the most base thing, because there's a lot of instability at the very base, in my opinion, with just like, what ground do we have to stand on? Yeah. And I want people to feel rooted in something that is holding them, inspiring them, making them feel sort of like wonder, tears welling up, and also that deep sense of empathy and connection that one can get from bringing a non-living thing to life through the craft of puppetry.
I think there's a lot of different ways to be effective. You can do a theater show that can rock somebody's world and change the way that they live. And you can do a theater show that doesn't. People are like, yeah, that was okay. Like
Mildly entertaining.
Mildly entertaining.
It's all one of those.
But same thing, like with activism, like you could bring puppets out into the street, and the surprise factor of being like, well, this thing is here and it's with me and it's supporting me and I'm part of this greater thing can be so inspiring to people, or it can be depressing. You can be shoved into an alleyway and not able to really express yourself, and so it's like there's not one that's better than the other, but there's lots of ways to reach people and to inspire people. So we want to use the whole toolbox.
You're not always able, though, to get across a full story, though, on the streets. Whereas, like, when you invite someone into a space to watch a performance, you do have a real opportunity, just leaning into the idea of storytelling as a theme. It is a different kind of curated space where you have their undivided attention, where I don't know if you've last protest you've been to, but it can be fairly divided, like, whoa, like just a lot going on. What I do think it's hugely valuable and it is necessary. I just highlighting personally in this interview the need to tell what we call, and what I can't remember the author, was it
Thomas Berry?
Yeah, telling the new story is about creating the new ethos or mythos that is like the stories that we need to be able to envision the future in some kind of real way, rather than like there's a lot of myth being generated by our culture that's like very nihilistic. The new story for us just wants to be one that where we're sort of like transforming our own consciousness, which starts with ourselves. I do this work to heal myself, and then hopefully it has some kind of wider effect, but I certainly don't think we have the answers. We just feel like it's important to live into the important questions.
One of our big initial forming of our company was, like Don was saying, like the protests of like in the Nevada test site, and we went to a lot of anti-war and also anti-globalization kind of protests, like in Seattle and DC, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization. And part of what we were doing there, well, partly we were learning our craft, but from other puppeteers who all gathered together, but also we were trying to create a space in which this is how we want to present ourselves to the world. This is the story that we're telling, and this is the people working together to create these things, is a kind of attempt to share who we are and share our story. Say, perhaps if you see us and this is the story that you're getting by seeing these puppets in the street and these people embodying, this river goddess or this creature of liberation, that we're more beautiful. Our story is more compelling. It's more that we want to draw people in. You bring your drums and you bring your beauty as much as you can and say, do you want to be a part of this? And so a lot of those events were kind of formative for me, of like wanting to carry that forwards, wanting to share that experience, and meeting with other puppeteers from all over the place, and you're like, how do you make your paper mache goop? Okay, like if you're going to sculpt a giant hand, I would use this cardboard or a painted bed sheet to tell this story. And you're like, oh, that was really cool. I want to do that too. So this kind of cross-pollination that was happening a lot in the early 90s. Not early 90s, I should say. Yes, but also for us, like the late 90s and, the early 2000s. Just it's like that culture that keeps on going and keeps on feeding itself. Bread and Puppet was an early progenitor of that. But it's kind of like continuously like passing on this knowledge and passing on this culture, and then we take it and we turn it into our own version, our own soup, and then we're trying to pass it on to the next group of people. So it's sharing those skills as much as we can.
I want to switch gears slightly.
Yeah.
And do a few rapid fire things.
Sure.
Just because we're covering a lot of ground, but also time is just flying by.
Yep.
So I'm going to challenge you all. This was funny because to tie in earlier to what you were saying, Donvon, about it's one thing to be able to have undivided attention and to create an experience where you have a lot of control over the variables versus being on the street, you have divided attention. And I challenge myself in this way a lot as a storyteller because I do a lot of public speaking. Just like, can you get to the point? Can you make it compelling?
Yeah.
Just say what they need to hear and like convince them. And it's not easy. Like it's its own skill.
Yeah.
So this is a live test for both of you. Whoever feels best, or we can do like one and then the other, just see whose is better. Just for people who haven't seen a Paperhand performance, what is Paperhand in the most pithy description you got?
So on the stage, you're welcomed into a beautiful sort of like forest where we do a pageant that is infused with storytelling that has giant puppets, masks, stilt walkers, shadows, illuminated puppets, all in basically moving flats, and sort of like a wide multidiscipline performance that I would say could be boiled down to an essential story, which is that all the healing and learning that we ever need is there for us in the natural world. That capitalism and other hateful, greedy sort of behaviors get in the way of our connection to that, and that there are ways that we can connect and overcome by uniting our hearts and minds through art and creativity, but also just through leaning in towards help and not harm. And so I would say that's like one version you could say is like the crux of the storyline that Paperhand repeats in many ways. We also kind of, I think, portrayed some version of that in what we did with you in the film. So that's one way I would put it. I mean, I'm sure I could have said it 100 different ways, but you want to give it a whirl?
Do you have a version? It's an elevator pitch. You got 30 seconds.
A Paperhand show is putting forth of the idea that the world is different than we think it is, that magic is real. And by putting ourselves into these handmade costumes, animal masks and shaggy cloth and giant gods made out of cardboard, we present that for people so that they can feel like, oh, sky beings are real, dragons are alive and with us. I can be part of this. I'm inside of it, and I can feel them coming to me and touching. I can reach out and touch them. I can feel connected to those creatures. I can see the life of an animal. I can see a fox dancing, whereas normally they're kind of hidden off in our alleyways and in our forests. We don't get to see them doing these things. And so to have all those things be real, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, it's a fundamental transformation inside of your brain. It's saying, like, it's not just this limited human world that's being sold to you. There's much, much more.
I actually love how vastly different those descriptions were. But also, what's an adult? Isn't everyone just a kid? Those were excellent. I do want to move a little bit into just offering professional advice. And so like one piece that we briefly glimpsed at, but we didn't get into too much, is the struggle or the experience of earning money making art. At what point, I mean, you both mentioned like we were in carpentry and then we're able to quit doing that, which presumably means like earning enough of a living making art that's no longer, you no longer need this like additional, more conventional labor. Mm-hmm. How did you find a way of doing that? How has your experiences, how have they grown and changed over time? And maybe to dovetail that into advice that you'd offer someone who wants to be a professional artist, because it is a struggle.
I mean, I would say, I love what you said, Donvon, about, for Peter Schumann, it's like he has enough. And that's a huge thing in what we do, is we want to be valued as artists. We want to be able to basically just keep doing our work. And so we need to have enough coming in. And so that sometimes means if we work for a foundation or something and they have a lot of money, or a school and they're wealthy, they can pay us well, and we say, great, thank you. We will continue going on doing our work. And sometimes we do work for maybe an activist organization or a homeschool group or something like that. They don't have a lot of money. We say, we want to do this work. We'll do it for free, or you'll give us whatever you have. and that's fine. It's really about being able to honor the time that people put into things. And, if we can't pay our puppeteers, or we can't pay ourselves, we can't continue to do the work. And it is a struggle because it's like, we ask for a donation at the Forest Theater show that we do every summer. And we also struggle because we're like, we don't want anybody not to come. We want everybody to come. But then to say to everybody, you can pay us anywhere from $0 to $1,000 is very confusing, and our front of house people hate us.
Yeah.
So we need to
we
need to kind of give a price and say, yes, you're welcome to pay what you can, but this is the asking price. Thank you very much.
I mean, so advice-wise, I'd just say, like, be willing to be uncomfortable when you're making the transition into only making it as an artist, but also it does take a real certain kind of, I'll use the word dogged determination again, where you just got to be tenacious. But not only that, because even when you're tenacious, you can get burnt out and exhausted. So, and I think that worked out for Jan and I, in that we were like getting something beyond money that was there for us as a network, family, a tradition, a community was all being built that was bolstering. Some of the payment comes in many different ways. Just people effusing and breaking into tears when you see them at Weaver Street or something, Just people like feeling it so big, that the effect on their lives that Paperhand has been some of the biggest. It hasn't been some of the biggest, but it's been some of the very real, tangible sort of profit, I guess you could say, that I've gotten, because it's very deeply satisfying and rewarding for any artist to feel like they're having a profound effect on someone. And so advice, though, is tricky only because it goes so differently for each person. But I just know that with leaning into being an artist for a living, I mean, you have to really believe in yourself in a way that is balancing between being an egotistical, like thinking you're so great. It's not about that. It's like enough ego force to just say, this is something that people want and I need to like meet this need. So you have to do a lot of evaluation of yourself as you go to make sure that you're like staying true to that obligation that you have to the community around you, to honor that relationship in a way where you're not just resting on your laurels and being like, pay me, I'm wonderful. It's more like I'm putting in the work to really dive deep, and I'm listening, making sure that voices are being heard from different parts of the community, that who's not at the table having this conversation. Lots of things like that all come in. But if you can allow that grappling to be something that gives you inner fortification, that is, I think, what will get you through. It's also sometimes just luck and crazy stuff happens. And I think a big piece for Jan and I was that because we make giant stuff, is that we had space made available to us for free for a long time, 10 years in an abandoned building. So it was kind of crappy, but it was free. And we were able to get on our feet. And then we had very reasonable rent for another 10 years. There's been a real leg up there, because like if we had started out at $5,000, $10,000 for a giant space, we would have been immediately out of business. You know what I mean? It wouldn't have been gone the same way. So I want to just be honest about that, because space was such a commodity for building giant stuff. There's been times in the recent past where I think it would surprise a lot of people, because we have such a institutional, stable feel in the community, because it's kind of a staple of a lot of people's understanding of this area. And in some ways, I don't know how that happened. That's a whole other story. But I think that people just thought that because every time they see us, the audience is full, and that we're just always at places, and so we must be getting paid. But there's been times, really recently, where we were just out of money. I was really hustling to make sure that more gigs were getting lined up, and just to kind of cover the basics, and those were challenging, and it kind of felt like that part was dragging me down and feeling a little bit like a burnout, Now because we try to pay as much as we possibly can to all of our puppeteers, and we pay our interns. That's been a real source of pride for me, to like pay and have it be like a job creator. I never thought of that going into it, but it was like, wow, this feels really good to sort of feed in a creative economy. But recently, in the past year and a half, we became a nonprofit and able to get some grants coming in. I think we got like $60,000 worth of grants last year, just to help it basically just like bolsters the ability to like be there without just sweating bullets that were just out of money, right? So it's like it's just there to cover the basics, so you have ground to stand on, which for me as a person who's been more mainly in charge of running the sort of business end, you know, it has felt a lot more of a relief, some bit of room to breathe. But it took us a while to get there, and people have been able to make tax-deductible donations, which has been great. In writing thank you letters to them, I just say it gives us wind under our wings. It helps us to like reach new height. We just want to have enough to keep going,
Right.
and to pay the people who are putting a tremendous amount of their own energy while having other jobs, mostly, to have them be supported and, you know, have that energy honored with some payment to make them feel like really good about it. Like, that advice, though, some people start out with a business plan and they try to execute the business plan. We were just like, let's just start running in a direction and then leap off of this cliff, and hope that people and other resources sort of like form under you
To catch you?
Yeah. I mean, that was sort of more like it was, financially speaking, as we were just kind of like shooting up into the air, say, you know, people started building like rickety things to help support that.
Yep.
Through effort or trade or energy or
Dollars.
It helps if your living expenses are low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's been a real journey, and I don't really have any true advice because we did it so haphazardly.
Sure.
I wouldn't say do it as haphazardly as we did. In retrospect, I'm not exactly sure what the best way to do it is. I just know that you have to believe in it, and you have to like find a way for it to give back to you, not only financially, but in a way that makes you feel like you're doing the right work that you're here to do in this world, because that will keep you going in the lean times.
One of the pieces of like leading a big creative team or a project or a group or an organization that I certainly resonated with when you discussed earlier, Donvon, about, I think you used the term like ego. Well, simply to say like, you don't want to be too egotistical, but I guess my thoughts there are, to an extent, you really have to have a lot of like pride and confidence in your ability, even as an individual artist, right? If you're sort of like putting yourself out there, inherently you need to be proud of what you're doing. You need to see the value in what you're doing. I think especially at an organizational level, there can be additional pressures in that way. Because it's like, I mean, I think of if I'm hustling to try to like get us funding or like start a thing or put something together, I have to go into those meetings with like a lot of confidence. I have to go in like, we got hot shit, like we're great, we're amazing, and you're gonna think so too, because I've been in those meetings where I'm like feeling the pressures of, oh God, if this doesn't go well, or like, oh, what if they're not gonna like it, and like you've already lost at that point, and that's a difficult balance to strike, I think, for people in general, but especially if we're like running organizations that we really believe in, that actually are amazing, that can be tough, that can take away. And I feel like all I'm thinking is just coming back to that, feeding the soul.
For me, the best practice I've been able to come up with around that is to make it about the work. And the work is not me.
Yes.
The work is like a we.
Yep.
And that's what we're trying to get people to believe in, is this sort of like mutual arising that is possible with humans in general. But I want people to believe in that vision of like this human endeavor that sure, I'm sort of like helping to like steward, but I'm not trying to make it like about myself personally. That's been an important piece for me.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to value the work that you do and be willing to ask for what you need to make it possible to keep on going and doing it. I know a lot of artists are very shy about that kind of stuff, and it's understandably hard, but it's just a simple fact that you need to put the dollar amount on what you need in order to keep going.
Have either of y'all heard of Amanda Palmer's philosophy on this? Like either her TED Talk or her book, The Art of Asking?
She's the one who has like the $2 million Kickstarter.
Right. It was like the most successful Kickstarter, I think, at the time.
Maybe it's not Kickstarter. Maybe it's Patreon that she gets like...
I think it was either a Kickstarter or GoFundMe. for an album because the label was like, we're not going to fund this. We don't think it's going to be successful. And she was like, what if I just ask my fans and like my audience and my community to pitch in, and then we record the label with that money? And it was like insanely successful, which got a lot of attention because it was thought to be impossible. And I'll just give you the gist, because the TED Talk is fantastic. Like, truly, I think it's so beneficial for every creative person, every artist, because it's a pivotal shift in the philosophy of asking for something. Specifically, because of her experience as a street performer, this was like her way of skipping out on a normal job, is she just started doing performance art on the street and noticed how very different the dynamic of a person standing on the street who is asking for money because they need it, which is reasonable, we all do, versus a person performing on the street with the evidence or like inclination of like, yeah, if you like what I'm doing, you're going to support me. You're going to give me $1. The difference, right, of like a musician. In her case, she was like a standing statue, and would, if someone came up to give her money, she would like have an exchange with them, have a moment, give them a flower, like smile, something like that. But I love this philosophy because it's true. I mean, there is a real difference. There's an uphill battle when we go in and we say, hey, dude, if we just had $5,000, like, you would help us so much, versus we have this incredible thing that we are creating. I want to give you an invitation to become a part of that. I want to share in this experience with you. And I mean, really the gist of it is it a reciprocal exchange in which the art is being co-created through that support, or is it a one person giving charity in which there's not reciprocity? There is simply an act of, I have something that you don't have and I'm going to give it to you. I mean, that's essentially her whole talk. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And it doesn't even have to be that the materials exchanged are very different. It's about the framing. It's about like how we ask. It's about saying, would you like to become a part of this, as opposed to, hey, I need money to make this happen. And so I've taken a lot of value from that. I actually have her book here. I think the speech is fantastic. I think it's very accurate. Also, the book is really good as an audiobook because a different artist like Ben Folds and various other musicians record one of her songs as a cover every chapter.
Well, I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, we've been honing that craft. At least I have been working on that, and how, you know, the art of just gathering the resources needed. And I mean, the most wearying thing about that is that there is still sort of like this undercurrent of like having to prove the essentialness of art in our lives, which is, I find very tiresome. Like it's like,
same.
I don't want to have to make that speech anymore.
Nope.
Like, just that you're trying to help people see just the importance that overall that creativity and infused in our culture, how important that is. And without it, we're all just like heading towards something very not okay with me. Let's just say that.
I mean, without it, there's no point.
Yeah. So I think some people do see that value kind of intrinsically, like, God, I'm just so glad this happens, and they just do it. And then other people have to be convinced, and it's like, I have gotten less into the business of trying to convince them.
Yeah.
I just trying to put the messaging and the collaborative effort that we're kind of trying to build culture here together in front of the right eyes, and have that, just skip that conversation altogether of like me convincing someone that the importance of art and artists.
I think that's actually very universal advice too for other creative folks. And like in the film world, I have learned that, yeah, I could be upset that the 10 people I talked to, I was like explaining all of that and they just didn't get it. Or I could talk to like 30 other people and maybe 2 of them are like, oh, that's awesome. That's super great. How can I help you? And sometimes it's just like people's minds are already made up and you don't necessarily have to change every person's mind. Maybe over time, just through continuing to do the work, they'll start to come around, or they won't. And it doesn't matter because there's like 8 billion people.
Just by showing up with integrity and knowing what you're here to do,
right,
is a big piece. But gaining that confidence does take some time.
Yep.
It doesn't just happen like when you're first starting out necessarily.
I think also showing that the work that you're doing has integrity and has a valid purpose in the world too. Like, you know, we get a lot of volunteers. We have like work days where people just come and they show up and they work weekend after weekend, and they're not getting paid, but they believe in what we're doing, and they're having an art experience. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like a vacation from their lives of being able to work, as a collective group, making something beautiful together. And that's a huge part of what we're doing. It's like, yes, we're getting paid enough to keep showing up and pay our doctor bills and stuff like that. But, we're providing a service for people, when we're creating community, and we're doing all those things that we want to be doing. And the money is a necessary part of it because that's the way that our economy works. But all these other things that we're making work, we're creating community spaces for people to develop friendships with one another. We're creating a space where people can network with one another and meet each other. We're doing all these things that you can't put a money value on it. But because we're doing that, people support us. They say, oh yeah, I want this to keep going. And if it was just a monetary exchange where it was like, we've got these puppets, you can pay us this much money and we will show up on time and we will do the thing and then we will leave and you will pay us.
Oh, we have to do that too sometimes.
Well, no. But if that was all that we did,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have that same feeling of connection with people.
Right.
I think Jan and I have always really looked at the value system. Like, what do we value? And do we value a forest? And it's like deeply interwoven connections that provide so many things. Holding the soil, oxygen, all these different things that are networked in. Like, where is the value in a river? Or we try to just shift the status quo away from value is a monetary term, period. There's other ways that value presents itself in the world, and someone can have a very valuable experience even if they come in there and they weren't able to pay for the ticket. That experience might stick with them and have value for them. Something like that. There's just lots of different ways to not limit ourselves to just the value that we're getting and that the community is getting from this sort of shared experience of creating this work.
It's tough sometimes obviously we're getting back to the overall evil pressures, right, of how capitalism can sometimes really warp our perceptions of what values are. And this is something that I'll consider a lot too when we're thinking about how we're going to release a film or a piece of media. Are we going to release it in a free platform, or are we going to release it in a paid platform? Well, paid may be beneficial because we get some money, and ironically sometimes is a better way of ensuring that an audience is invested in the thing, because it's well, if I spent $5, I want to watch the whole thing. If it's just on YouTube, well, then I can just watch one of the other 12 billion things, which is really interesting. It is interesting, to have some base level of investment, even if it's a tiny amount. In this media saturated, dominated age, I would argue, that we're currently living in, it's hard, constantly having to vie for attention. Please give an example, big or small, but a mistake that was made that you grew and you learned a valuable lesson from, and hopefully you share that lesson as well.
I can say, when I work on building, just my own building technique is I'll try something and it often doesn't quite work. So that's a regular failure that I take as part of my process. And it's I learned from doing it with my hands. The other thought, that's just one type of failure, regular everyday failure. But more of a formative moment was when we were going to DC. We wanted to help with this protest of mothers from Iraq and protesting the war that was going on back in the early 2000s. And we didn't have a specific Iraqi woman puppet, but we had a puppet that looked like a sad mourning grandmother that was representing winter for another show that we did. So we brought that one up. And we had some people kind of looking at it when we brought it to the protests in DC, and they were like, what is this? And we explained it, and they would say, oh, okay. And then we had this one young woman come up to us, and she said, what is this puppet? This doesn't look like me. This doesn't represent me. Why did you bring this here? And she was upset. And she actually walked off, and we asked her to come back, and we had a really good discussion with her and with other people around to try to get kind of clearer. And just that simple act of when you're representing a person in a specific situation, people have ownership over that. Like they want to claim their own space, and to have these people coming in who are not Iraqi women and bringing our puppet, like there's a sensitivity there that we didn't have at that moment, or that we were, being opened up to. And that's something that we learned and try to bring into all of our work. We think about, like, if we're going to make a human, if we're going to like represent a certain type of person, we want to do it authentically. Like, we want to have either a person who looks like that making the puppet, or having them, being part of the story, consulting with us.
Yeah.
We want it to not just be like, oh, we're just going to tell our story about whoever we care, in whatever style, from whatever part of the world. And we don't care. Like, we don't want to be those people. We want to like make it feel authentic and
Not extractive.
Want to connect with the people that feel ownership and identity to those images.
That was a good example.
That was a great example.
We were both there, and we both felt that pretty keenly because we care, and we were doing it, moving from this like good intention to like have it be like a grieving mother, right, for all the people that were going to die in Iraq. So that was the intention, but we've had to learn that lesson again and again, that sometimes intentions are just, of course, not enough. It's a fine place to start, but it has to follow through with real work and real effort and collaboration and process and lots of things. I would say for me, the thing that I feel maybe least proud of is just my sense of overwhelm with the amount of hats that I wear and the type of all the things that we've been describing here with the jack of all trades, but add the financial and the advertising and the administrative and the other, all the things, has led to like a shortness or like a cranky pants that has made some people, I've made people feel small, like by being very curt or short or hot with them, and or just not comfortable. And that feels like a failure of my own spiritual development that I'm still working on, that I think most people across the board would say that I've gotten like better, and I'm quick to heat up. Just my like whole demeanor, or my demeanor, but my like constitution is like heats up, but then I let go and can like really good at letting go of things, but that doesn't mean that other people have let it go necessarily. But I mean, I think the story has been mostly one of like good positivity with like our puppeteers and the love created there. But I look back at like wishing that I had been able to bring more kindness. And I wanted to say this earlier, but we made so much of our work about deadlines.
Yeah.
We set a deadline, and we're going to have a show by this time. The whole Paperhand experience has been like, first thing was like, well, there's a show coming up. We're gonna make something happen? Are we gonna show up looking like idiots?
Yeah.
And so we kept like leaning into that pressure, if you will, to like make something good by the time that you're there with people looking at you and listening to you. And that's been a long refinement.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some part of that refinement has been getting better at like communicating calmly, clearly, lovingly, if you will, just with kindness, because I want that community experience to be a reflection of the greater thing that we're trying to create, which is more help than harm. So yeah, I'm trying to lessen the harm, and that has been, I would call, a failure. I'm doing much better at, but I'm still, have my days, where it's kind of like, oh.
I'm glad that you shared that, honestly, because as a deadline-oriented person, or just like, I feel like I have two modes, which is like fun, creative, abstract, super hopeful, like optimistic, and then like we have to actually get the shit done. Like we need to get the shit done. Like we actually don't even have enough time to do this. Like why are we talking about this right now? And I similarly have faced a lot of recognizing how that comes out in ways that I regret. I feel like in part just carrying the pressure of this needs to get done, because if it doesn't get done, all this could fall apart. I do feel like that can percolate in like why aren't you taking these things as seriously as I am? But at the same time, I think you're right in terms of this growth of it's possible to communicate and convey that there are essential deadlines and things that need to get done with a little bit more calmness and a little bit more patience and a little bit more love of like, hey, I'm sorry to bring this up again, but like we actually have to finish this right now. But I too have gone through like long bouts of that, or getting mad at myself, or
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
And the pressure and the sort of compression of doing a giant puppet show in a very short amount of time, like building it all, rehearsing it all, creating all the music, writing it, making the T-shirts, all of the things. It's so many things, and sometimes it can just crash in on you, and you don't. And when you know that there's just a lot of stuff that has to get done, you might just be like blah blah blah, blah and you're just barking orders, and not like taking the time to be like kind, I guess, about it. And I mean, to some degree, you also have to have kind of a thick skin to like get through. You just got to be like, okay, we're just in go mode. So, like, time to put all my personal sort of feelings aside.
Yes,
for the most part. But I mean, I'm not trying to make that be like a bypassing or an excuse, because you can still do it well and keep the vibes positive,
I feel like kitchen workflows sometimes actually embody this really well, or like fine dining. Like I've worked both front of house and back of house in places, and I think about how if it's a busy, like if it's slammed, if you're in a bar and it's like there's 60 people and we can seat 40 and we just have to go. Like I'm thinking of like when I was like bartending, for instance, it's like you are terse with everybody, especially the people that you're working with, and everybody gets it. Everybody's like, you're almost like communicating on a spiritual level, less so on like a verbal level, like what you're saying and how you're physically acting. It does not matter, because everyone's just trying to like move the machine along and survive. Exactly. And there's almost like a sense of more closeness, I feel like, a more like, I see that you're doing all that, I see that I'm doing all this, behind, corner, look out, doing this, doing that. I wonder if there are more ways to like infuse. It feels like a lot of people in performing arts have done service industry stuff. No mistakes there. I mean, that makes sense. But to copy some of these elements, I think sometimes working on big sets. The team that I worked with for the Gen X project, which is a whole story and a half, I mean, they're incredibly professional crew. After working with them many times, it became similar. Like well-oiled machine, they know what they're doing. We're curt, but we have a lot of shit to do. So I feel like the taskmaster role and mindset that maybe we each share sometimes, of like, we just got to get it done, for the cohesion of the whole unit of everybody in the community, just a way to bring everyone to at least temporarily know what that's like might help a little bit, might add more compassion. If you're both, I'm a little frustrated because it feels like I'm the only one who recognizes we're falling behind right now. And at the same time, a few other people being like, oh no, we're actually falling behind right now. Like maybe we should actually help pull that along. Okay. We've covered so much great ground. The final section of this show for everybody, and this will be fun because you each get a chance to do it. Maybe you do it together. I don't know.
We'll do one word at a time.
You should, if you can. Oh, this is real improv. Spin me a story. Be honest. What gives you hope for the future? One word at a time.
I don't know if we can do that.
Okay.
Well, that's a tricky one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that it's easy to get overwhelmed in the world that we live in now. And stories help me. I'm going to tell an embarrassing story. When I was a little kid, I went to go see Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being kind of just like, wow, this is amazing. So immersive for like a 7-year-old or whatever to go see this thing. And recognizing that here was this person who, this protagonist he's a reluctant hero. He just wants to race his pod racers with his friends in the desert, and he doesn't want to be a part of this big, overwhelming war that's going on. And then stuff gets real, and he ends up joining, and he becomes part of this struggle. And it's that classic hero's journey. And I sometimes fall back on stories like that one to help myself manage the world that we live in now, and say, like, this is hard, this is not what I expected, this is not the always providing peaceful world that will survive forever, no matter what we do to it. This is a struggle. And if I remind myself I'm a person inside this struggle, like, this is me, I'm a warrior for peace, I'm an artist for community, and that makes me feel proud to continue working and doing that good thing. Like I'm a hero on my own adventure, and that helps me.
I for some reason, I'm mostly able to think of moments within the context of our work. When I think about what gives me hope is people's willingness to dip just beneath the surface of our sort of normal humdrum, whatever, email, written, social media, life, whatever the hell, and like be in a magical reality where they're just sort of opened up and you can sort of feel the sort of like ooh, ah, kind of wonder just in their facial expression. And when I see like a bunch of hands reach up when a puppet's like dipping down over the crowd, those are moments that give me hope, actually. And so you could almost say that the reason I do this is to like witness those moments. People are super present and feeling connected. And that to me does stimulate my hope chord that people still have that ability to tap into their inextricable, integral connection with every piece of this universe and this earth.
Yeah.
And to just see some of the joy, the tears, for some reason, people, it immediately stimulates an emotional response of tears, because it's just like they feel all the non-connected moments that are leading up to that moment sometimes. And it can be quite powerful from my experience to just witness that and to do it with a sense of tenderness and love when the puppet's coming down.
Yep.
To them, and their instinct is just to raise their hands and touch. That does give me hope. My daughter gives me hope because I feel a sort of beholdenness to her and to kids, because I love kids, to not just be like, well, I gave up. I just said meh. I just said I can't do it. I just don't. Doesn't feel like an option for me. So even if I have a story running in part of my brain also that's like, ooh, yep, humans are in trouble, like I just stick with the hope story because I want to inspire people to just lean into their best way of being here. And I want the human experience. I want it to work. Do I ultimately believe that it will? No, not really. Evolutionarily speaking, it's just another species that will come and go. So I do have that undercurrent going, and I think we're speeding up the loss. But I have hope that we can still create something beautiful while we're here, and more than beautiful, but deeply meaningful that makes our life richer. And I just have to have hope to keep making this work, and some of those little moments like that definitely feed it.
That brings this story to a close. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we would love your input. If you have an idea, like a future guest or a new segment, send us a message, podcast@etherealfilms.org, or you can leave us a comment on the Substack. The show is made to help other creatives just like myself, so if you want to support us, tell another friend to start listening. It really makes a difference. Real Perspective is produced in Hillsborough, North Carolina at Ethereal Films. Episodes are co-produced by Ava Richardson-Dodd, and Sammy Bauer is our head of cat wrangling. I'm Eli, and that was A Real Perspective.